I wanted to go back to Greenham for a moment, thinking of one of the disturbing things was that women at Greenham were talking about electromagnetic radiation, and women I wasn't living at the camp during that intense time when so many women thought that was happening at the camp, but it was very frightening to hear and see women. I mean, there were women at Greenham walking around with aluminum foil around, their sexual organs, trying to protect themselves. And I had no question that that was happening. I didn't understand it. I'm not a scientist, but that was really frightening to think about, done intentionally or unintentionally, whether it was pollution, all the repercussions and reasons for that to happen. But that was something we were sharing with them. And in the current issue of Off Our Backs, there's some mention of one of the organizers of Wages for Housework, who I haven't heard of them in a million years. And I just read that this week. And that was an organization that my memory is it's not good stuff. So I don't know if you remember all that. But they're in Off Our Backs. So that was, I don't know if I knew about Wages for Housework. Yeah, I did. So that was going on at Greenham, and then we had some encounter with them at the encampment. And I was very proud of the encampment structure of decision making, where we had the process where we had certain agreements. I don't remember what the term we call them. They were kind of institutional agreements. And if those institutional agreements were going to change, we had a process that there had to be 3 regional meetings, and there had to be at least 1 mailing, so that it was, very wonderful how women had ownership even if they weren't attending. And so Wages for Housework weren't able to do whatever they wanted to do because of our structure. And it wasn't even related to those women at the encampment who didn't feel safe with them. It was very straightforward, the structure. So the structure protected us, and it's like an example of, I'm so proud of us for having a good structure. So structure can really keep us safe. It can really make a big difference. And whereas Greenham didn't have that kind of structure. Greenham was decentralized, but they didn't have an overriding decision-making structure. Maybe because it was bigger than we are, or just that it was a different community. But we had some very strong structures. Perhaps that was because we had women who had been doing lots of organizing before, who helped create that structure. I haven't analyzed all of that, but it's something I'm very proud of, that we had that clear structure. Another thing that I'm proud of is, which you may have heard of, but the second year of the encampment, Pam Flanagan and I met with the county police, and we met with the assistant. I don't remember his name, but the assistant, and we're doing our nonviolence, which is to be open and talking and being upfront. And he said, out of all the people that I had to deal with last year, the state police and the public relations personnel at Seneca Army Depot and the governor's office, and I don't remember who else, he said, you all were the most honest. And now that's one of my proudest moments, because that's what we're talking about at the encampment, was to be nonviolent, to be radical, but to be nonviolent. And he affirmed that with us by saying that to us. So those are the moments where you felt very proud. When I was in Europe, and this is those moments where you have strong emotion, and I went to Sicily, to Camiso, the women's peace camp in Camiso, but I went to Catania to visit Anna Villa, who I had known from the summer before at the encampment, and she lived in a 3-story apartment. She was up on the 3rd floor, and I was at the basement on the ground floor, and I was looking for her, and she came to the stairs, and she looked down the stairs, and she said, "It's real. The camp was real," because here I was in Catania, and she was up there, and it was a real thing. Her experience at the encampment the summer before was a real thing. So those kinds of moments that transcend time and space. One of the issues in my life is disappointment with people, and what intimacy is. And there's an intimacy that we can experience, in a meeting, in a demonstration that's profound, that transcends time and a relationship. There's but then there's the intimacy of ongoing friendship, and it's an ongoing issue in my life of being disappointed with that ongoing intimacy. And that has happened in relationships at the encampment. So in some ways, what I think of as the encampment experience of those 10 years being with those women was not that my experience of intimacy was good, but my hope of intimacy kept me going. It wasn't the experiences I had with women, because I had lots of bad experiences and disappointing experiences, but the hope of what we were doing together kept me going. There's great differences of what the word friendship means. And I think one of the things that we can do as women, and maybe the encampment, because of having ritual and ceremony and expressing all of ourselves, not just intellectual expression, that we can have intimacy pretty easily. We create opportunities for real intimacy, and that's good. So we're not afraid to express our emotions of anger, of sadness, and I think the encampment provided lots of opportunity to do all of that, because we wanted to be our full selves, and we allowed ourselves to be our full selves. And living together gives so much more opportunity to do that. And I think because there were women who were living at the camp than those of us, when I wasn't living there, coming and going, you still were stepping into that living together. So even if it was just for a few days, it still was the living together, which is more profound than a meeting, and difficult, but deeper, broader, bigger. I lived at the camp for a few months, and then during that time I also participated in a peace walk with the Japanese Buddhist monk who had a relationship with the camp. So she was walking in upstate New York, so I walked with her for about a month. So that was part of those few months, and I lived at the camp when Bird joined us, and I still have her army boots that she put in the pile of clothes. At the camp we would have a box for odds and ends passing on. So I still have her army boots.
Tell us about Bird.
So when was that? Well, Bird, I wasn't there for all the time, but I guess she was in the military and she started having a dialogue with us. She told me that she had seen, they had shown films, propaganda, shall we say propaganda films against the camp, and she thought, those women look interesting, So she started coming around on her off hours, and then eventually left the military. So she was like the ultimate conversion, literally to leave the military and move to the peace camp. That was ultimate conversion. Say, from the first summer there were events. There were events, demonstrations, workshops on spiritual matters. If I think about it, there's quite a diversity of things that occurred. There was an organization out of Rochester that was Catholics who had a regular presence at the base. That had been going on for years, so we at times participated with them, and sometimes there was some difficulty because they were Catholic and some women weren't so comfortable with that at the encampment. I don't know if there was difficulty from their side to us, because I wasn't part of them, but so there were different services. There were Jewish services. I know regularly there were women at the camp who were living at the camp who would have Shabbat services Friday night. I would say then as time passed, it became more and more Wiccan kind of ceremonies, which I'm just thinking about how there would be demonstrations at the base or actions at the base with all those different traditions. I'm really thinking about it. There were different traditions where we expressed ourselves at the base or on the base with those spiritual ceremonies. I'm not sure what else to say. I hope. I would say many times there was a profoundness to those ceremonies, and that most times from the encampment that women were respectful. In the larger community of upstate New York, there were certainly prejudices against Wiccan events and fear of that, which sometimes was even verbalized, like to me living at the camp and being involved with community or activities. And this is not your question, but there was sometime maybe within the first year of the encampment, I was at a gas station and I saw one of the men who had been part of the opposition demonstrations, and he was at the gas station, and I decided to go and attempt to talk to him, non-violently, and I went over to him, and he recognized me, and he was like, "Don't come near me. Don't come near me," something like that, So I felt sad, but I thought, I'm going to try. Here it is many months later, and we're at this gas station. I'm going to try to dialogue with him a little bit, but he didn't want to. But I felt good about it, that was my last encounter with him, was my attempt to reach out to him in a positive way, a reconciling way. For me, I had not experienced Wiccan traditions until I was at the encampment, and that was very powerful. Again, it was developing intimacy. It was developing empowerment. There was a woman who, there were fire walks going on at the encampment, which were interesting, and I realized that that one of the reasons I was attracted to them was that I was attracted to the power of that woman, and I decided not to do it because it didn't seem like it was a good reason for me to participate. It was dangerous in a negative way, and so I didn't participate in it. And I told her about it. But not to say that the firewalks were bad, but just for me, that why I was being drawn was not healthy. So I didn't do it. So ritual takes us to another place. Spirituality takes us to another, and empowers us. These are good things. I wanted to stop those weapons from being deployed to Europe. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to. Or some of us, I mean, that's what I wanted to do. Maybe I should say, I mean, I wanted to. And we held on to that hope that we could stop them somehow. And I believe that we were part of the effort to break down the wall between the East and the West. I believe that the peace movement in the West helped to change the Soviet Union, break down the wall in East Berlin. Whether anyone else recognizes that, I believe that we were, it was part of that change in society on the planet. I think the encampment, because we were living together, we created space for a lot of different kinds of women to be together, and for women to express themselves in different ways. And we were attempting to live what we wanted. We were living in our utopia as best we could. I think it was Mariason. It was like the Women's Encampment for Peace and Justice Now. She wanted to change the name, it's like, it took me some time to understand that, but it's like, yeah, no, now, not in the future, now. I think the future is also like not to have nuclear war, that's the future, but like now, we want peace and justice now. So that's how we were attempting to live, not in the future of our daily lives, but the now. And another encounter I had with local community was the second summer we had a public, I don't know if you remember this, but we had a open house for women and men, so that men could come on the land, And we only had a handful, very few people came, but we had it, and we put announcements in the Finger Lakes newspaper, and there was a man who came, and there was a photo taken of him with some peace camp women, which was in the paper. And at that time, we were trying to create some kind of meeting dialogue with like the VFW, Veterans of Foreign War, and the peace camp women, because there had been animosity prior to that. So we were like starting to set up a meeting, and I had been talking to this man over the phone, and then his picture was in the paper, and he had come to the camp humbly, like, and admiring us, admiring our courage and perseverance and our actions. And then after this photo in the paper, he was like the president of the VFW. People started calling him a communist. So he dropped out. He didn't want to. He was going to have the dialogue, I think, at his house, but it just freaked him out so much. And he knew he wasn't a communist, but people were calling him a communist, so he dropped out. But that was still a wonderful encounter, because I got to talk to him, and he got to talk with me, and he came to the camp, and that was a big stuff. He came to the camp. So I think the authenticity of our actions, was profound, and that helped to hopefully make permanent change. I just got a letter from Hulda Clark, who I keep in touch with, and I had told her about my sister dying of cancer, and she said, I tried to talk to women at the camp about health, and they didn't want to talk to, they didn't want to learn about health, and they didn't want to talk. Why is that? Why is that? We humans fall into patterns of cliques, and of maybe I'm incorrect in interpreting kind of in and out circles, and we try to keep away from that, or I try to, but it's still present sometimes. My friend Birgit, who I had met when I did that tour, and then came to the States for a while and was at the camp, didn't live at the camp, but visited the camp. And she was telling me about a friend of hers once who was having a baby, and Birgit moved to another city to be with her friend. So to be with her friend while her friend was having the baby. And that was to her what a friend was. It was like, whoa, that's a big deal. Not lover, friend. You know, she moved to another city to be near her friend when her friend was pregnant. Well, I'm going to change the subject. One of the things I realized, I was talking to someone about the encampment, and that first year, I think there was one mirror, and it was in the healing room where there was a first aid cabinet, this old first aid cabinet someone had put up, and that was the only mirror, I think, in the whole camp. And I was reading some silly women's magazine, this like U.S. women like look at mirrors 100 times a day or 120 times a day or something. It's like, there was a whole year I did not look at myself in a mirror. I mean, this is the whole year. I lived in a tent for part of the year, and then I didn't look in a mirror. It's like, and what profound thing that is in the United States, for a woman not to look in a mirror for a year. It wasn't important. It wasn't part of my life. I mean, I guess if I was putting context, then you need a mirror, but that was really, and I didn't think about it till years later, like that, how profound that is, not to look in a mirror, in this culture that makes us women do all these crazy things. What was going on? It seems that we had some understanding that, we knew that things had slowed down. The first couple of years of the encampment, we were working with the assumption that the summer was going to be like the first summer, in terms of the thousands of women, and it never was again. And we kept on thinking it should be, or it would be, or it could be, and it wasn't. So it took us some time, and I was clear that it was okay that it wasn't, that we were still doing important things, and it was good to be there. And having lived at the camp and having lived in the community, there's just something very powerful about long term, that is very different than a one-time demonstration. So even though it was much smaller, I felt right that we were there, and that was all good stuff. We were still communicating with European peace movement, and so we were still getting letters on occasion from Europe and other parts of the world. So our presence there was still a good thing. The transformer die, I don't recall where I was emotionally with the decision, but I was part of coming up with some of the possibilities, and I personally was involved with getting a meeting together with some of the Seneca people and Cayugas, because we recognized that the land had been Cayuga Nation land as part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and so that was that was the little piece that I took. And I didn't hold on to it as the only possibility, but that it was a real possibility, and I was happy to help that happen. And I had a relationship with a man who was living in Buffalo, and I was really happy to give him respect and to go through that process respectfully with each other, and that they respected us. And I felt really good about that, and it was okay that we didn't decide that too. It wasn't like I held on to it as the only possibility of several possibilities. It was fine with me, the decision that we made, which was that there were a group of women, Estelle, Twilight, Mary Hilton, and there were a number of women who wanted to continue, and that we were changing the encampment into another body, another creation, and so those were all good things that I thought that was fine, but I by that point I had decided I did not want to continue, but it wasn't out of any anger or animosity. It was just, that was my decision. As time passed, what we didn't do was we didn't make a plan for if that wasn't working, what we were going to do. And I feel sad that how the land just went back to the county, because that was a concern from the summer of '83 that was going to happen. And I feel sad that happened. And I feel some shame. As I sit here thinking about it, I feel some shame about that. There were positive things that could have happened, that would have been permanent, that would have been positive, another transformation, and that those things didn't happen. And what happened was a negative. The land went back to the county, who's doing whatever they want with it. So it's not good. It's disappointing, and I feel some shame because back in '83 that was a concern, and I was part of that decision-making process, and we didn't. Those of us who made that decision to pass the land on to the Women's Collective, the Women's Peace Land Collective, all of us didn't make a check-in process, or some other process to evaluate that or to finalize it, or we didn't do that. The encampment, we made a lot of good decisions, so many decisions that I'm very proud of, like the archives at the Schlesinger, our decision-making process that protected us from what I think was, CIA or whoever it was with wages for housework, trying to infiltrate us. So we made lots of good decisions, and I think I felt good about that decision to pass the land on, but Cindy Sangri and I talked, and it was like, yeah, it would have been good to have a checkup decision. But the encampment didn't exist anymore. We closed the encampment. So I don't know how do we go about making that kind of structure? Have a follow-up with an entity that doesn't exist anymore, because there's a new entity. So transform or die. I think having so much playful things was just so wonderful for us at the encampment, because facing the horrors of militarism and violence that we face is very helpful to be playful and silly, and give each other the opportunity to do that together, and it's easy, I don't know for you all, it's easy it's just like so much a part of us, part of me, that when I'm in other situations, it's like, don't people understand or know that? And people don't know that. Or at a meeting or conference and everyone's very serious, and people don't know about their humanity and how that helps the whole situation to be playful or to be silly. They don't know about that. I have been continuing to be involved in activism, and I do not have that kind of community like I did with Women's Pentagon Action and the encampment. I don't know if I will again. I certainly miss many pieces of it. I'm in a stable, healthy, happy relationship, a romantic relationship with my partner, who is a man who is not at all involved in activism. So that's a very new piece. I'm healthier than I was, physically healthier. I've lost weight. I'm exercising. So those are things that I didn't have when I was at the encampment, which I have now, which are good things. For 8 years, I was with my dear sister Marissa, dealing with cancer, and that has took up a lot of time, physical time, and emotional energy and mental energy. Where was I going? So I miss those. Yeah, I miss some of that, and I don't have it, and maybe I will again, or maybe I won't. I don't know. In '95, I participated in an international interfaith peace pilgrimage to Hiroshima to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the U.S. dropping the atomic bomb. And that was something that I had always had in my mind, that as a U.S. citizen, I wanted to go pray for peace in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I thought that was the 50th anniversary was an auspicious time to do that. And I had met that Buddhist order. I don't know if I met them at the encampment, but I had gotten to know them better at the encampment. And in the fall of '84, I spent a month at the Peace Pagoda in Leverett as an acknowledgement and a thank you to them for walking to the encampment in '83. So then I walked with that order. That's the order that organized the walk in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that was quite shocking in terms of position of women. You know, having encountered them going to Greenham, it was different monks and nuns who were in the States doing that work than the ones in Japan. So I do miss that experience of both the Greenham, but not so much. I mean, Women's Pentagon Action and the encampment. I have a friendship with Marianne Beale that I mentioned, who I met through Seneca, through the Women's Pentagon Action, and that's about it. I have kept in touch with a few women from the encampment, and then you know that I was working on this book project for all these years, and then I finally had to face the reality that I wasn't doing it, and all I was doing was feeling guilty about not doing it. So this is not healthy and good. So last summer when I moved, then I had some of the encampment archives here that Cindy had and that I had. So I brought those up, hand delivered those to the Schlesinger. So I still have some encampment material that is mine, that's here in the house. But the the encampment archives are now all at the Schlesinger. Well, Cindy Sangri and I started, and we worked on the book for many years together, and we had an outline, and we wanted to, the working title was Changing Our Lives, how the encampment changed our lives. So we wanted to have, the book was to be about the whole life of the encampment. So all those years, with looking at how it changed our lives personally, how it changed organizing, how it changed the world. That was sort of the vision of it. It's still a good idea, but I had to face that I wasn't doing it, and that if I look around who writes books, people who are in PhD programs, which I'm not in a PhD program, so it's hard to decipher, where we learned what from. But certainly, the women that I have met over the years who were at the encampment, that working title came from that many women said it changed my life. Many women of various ages, not every woman, but many women said that. So it changed our lives for the better. I would say my first thought is freedom. That more experience of freedom, of living, of expressing. I don't know. I think I have less fear. I don't know. Certainly, the experiences at the encampment improved my fearlessness, I would say. Demonstrations. I was interviewed by a woman who was doing like a master's or a PhD, and I was telling her about the action that we did where we ran onto the field, the airstrip at Seneca Army Depot, and the experience of that was that we wanted to stop the deployment of those weapons, and we and I have been doing nonviolence trainings. You don't run. There's these things you don't do. But we got over the fence, and I still have a scar because my ankle got caught in the fence. And we ran over the fence, and then we were running to the airstrip, which is that's policy. You're not supposed to run, civil disobedience. But we wanted to get to the airstrip, and then we were on the airstrip, and we wanted to stop those weapons. They were leaving. They were leaving from that base, literally. We as best we knew, they were actually leaving from that base. We wanted to stop them. We wanted to actually stop them. So it was on that airstrip, and the helicopters are coming, and it felt like my image, my memories of watching the Vietnam War in helicopters and military, and here's these military men in their outfits, and this guy is trying to stop me, and I'm fighting him, which I never do. I've never had brothers, I never fought, and I'm fighting him no, we have to stop these weapons, and I'm pushing him off me, and I think about it, what was I doing? But it was so intent that's what we wanted to do. And he wasn't fighting me. It wasn't an aggressive thing. But he was trying to stop me. And that same day, then Twilight, who was my lover, and I, and then this affinity group of women, we were in a bus on the base, and I was crying. And there was a soldier who was outside, and I think he started crying. He heard me crying, and it touched him, and he walked away. He couldn't, it was too much for him. But that was a very profound time. Because I was in control, it wasn't that I was hysterical, it was that intense emotion. And he had to turn around, and they moved the van, or he moved, because he couldn't put it together. It was too much, So that was I think those kind of moments, they do change. Change happens one-on-one, doesn't it? Really, true change happens one-on-one on a personal level with a real experience. And so we had a lot of those in those moments. Something we haven't talked about that's difficult at the encampment is that we created a safe space, and so women that were not well mentally came to the camp, because they knew it was a safe place, and that was very difficult to deal with. It was difficult to deal with them actually, and institutionally to think about it, because we would talk. We had no options. Where could we send these women? There wasn't a place. There aren't healthy places to send women who have mental health problems. But we did not have the capacity to take care of them either. It was very difficult dilemma in a very real way, just like when people would drop off cats and dogs at the camp, well, what are we going to do? We can't take care of all these cats and dogs.
Or homeless women.
Or homeless women and mentally ill women.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those were some frightening moments, thinking about this one woman, I don't remember her name now, who had some mental health problems. I knew that already. And then when she got arrested, she went off a little bit. That was a concern. And I had that kind of similar experience with Not in Our Name action, which happened the year after. I think that happened the fall of '84 in New York City. And this woman started fighting the police. And that was pretty frightening, but Grace Paley intervened and helped calm everybody down. She was a peace camp woman. It was I'm a peace camp woman. How do I protect the attitude of these New York City women from the peace camp women who are these hippie freeloaders women? and she did calm down, but she was someone who, she shouldn't have been arrested. She knew that about herself, and she pushed herself. She shouldn't have done it, because once the police started touching her, but she didn't pay attention to her own internal knowledge about herself. It's hard to be absolutely clear about it all, because I'm now sitting here how many years later, but I did have some of that understanding, and I would say that it came from my background of being involved in Christian peace movement, and I lived at the Des Moines Catholic Worker for a while, which provides shelter to homeless people. And the Worker is an intentional community that has all different kinds of people living together. So people who were provided hospitality because they were homeless do become members of the collective. So you're living all together. So young adult, and then at the peace camp I was like 23, 24. So I already had that experience of living at Des Moines Worker, and I had worked with Community for Creative Nonviolence in DC, which Mitch Snyder was a part of, and that again is the same situation where people who were living on the streets, homeless people, became part of the community, living with folks like me. So the two kind of areas about class and diversity that I have memories of as a child were, one, I lived in Ogden, Utah when I was 12, and I experienced racism in some way because I couldn't articulate it all, but I was clearly a foreigner in Ogden, Utah, from the Bronx to Ogden, Utah, and I had a sense that people thought I was Native American, and I had both senses that was something really cool and wonderful, and that wasn't okay from other people's perspectives. So I feel like I experienced some racism directed towards me somehow, being other. And then in high school, I started becoming aware of class, because I don't know if I was so aware of people with less money than me, but I was aware of people with more money than me. So I knew that existed in high school. The kids who went to Bermuda on summer vacation and went skiing in winter vacation and had horseback riding lessons, and that wasn't the class I was in. They were not supportive, but they were not supportive. That's what I would say. I'm sure that they were really frightened, but I didn't really talk to them a lot about all of this. Like, I didn't tell them I did civil disobedience actions, but then I got a subpoena for something at my parents' house, and they opened it, and then my dad read about it. So, and my parents still like, aren't you over that? Like, I have a women's Pentagon Action poster in my office, and my dad is sort of like, aren't you over that? Or I'm in a relationship with a man, so periodically I just still tell them I'm bisexual, and they're like, oh, aren't you over that? So that's still. It was an intentional community of opposition to militarism outside of a military base that existed for 10 years.